Welcome back to Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World, whatever site you're tapping into at this moment. And we are going to continue with our question and answering. I pull out a question from the jar, and I attempt to answer it. These questions come from questions that were actually posed to me. They come from questions I heard being posed to other individuals. They've come from a search on the net when I check in what are good questions to ask about spirituality. And so I have several different questions in this jar. Now I had already pulled this one out. I'm going to try to attempt to answer it in the short time frame that I have. Most cases I will just go non-edited. I will just give you whatever answer I have and I'll put that up so that you know that it's very authentic. But I have cheated with this question. I have done a previous video attempting to answer it, but I realized that I made an error in a description that I was using, so I did feel compelled to come back and do to answer this question again on another video. So this is a second attempt, and this will be, hopefully won't be doing this too often because I do want this to be as authentic as possible. The question that I received when I attempted to answer this earlier was, when you suffer, you go deep. What does that mean? When you suffer, you go deep. What does that mean? So I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to attempt to answer this again. When you suffer, you go deep. I think we first need to look at human suffering and what human suffering really entails. When we think of human suffering, we tend to think erroneously that suffering is what the world gives us in the form of challenge and hardship. What it gives us in terms of the unpleasant and unfavorable circumstances that we may have been asked to experience. While I have come to see suffering through all my research and through my own life experience as not necessarily what we're handed from the external world and what we have in our life and what we don't have in our life. It's not whether or not we've lost our job, or if we have no money in our account, or if our health is failing, or our relationships are breaking down. That's really not what suffering is. Suffering is our response, or more appropriately said, our reaction to what we are experiencing. Suffering is a mind-made experience. I guess that's the best way of looking at what suffering is. It's a mind-made experience. We as human beings have a tendency to react in habitual ways to what we experience in life. We have a tendency to seek pleasure because we want what's favorable in our experience, which is very natural. And we also have a tendency to push away that which we experience as unfavorable or unpleasant. We resist certain components of life. We grasp and cling to what we want, and we tend to resist, push away what we don't want. Now, this resistance and pushing away comes in many different forms. It comes in the form mostly of how we handle our emotions or unpleasant experiences. We have a tendency, and you can ask any psychiatrist, starting with Freud and then on, about what our biggest issue in life is. And that tends to be a tendency towards repression and suppression of emotional experiences that we find unpleasant, our denial and our avoiding that which is unpleasant, our stuffing down, our projecting outward onto a world what we have experienced inside ourselves. Emotions that we are not comfortable experiencing because we've been conditioned to believe that they were bad or wrong or whatever, or that we were bad or wrong for having them. We tend to project out onto the world, so the world becomes this dangerous, awful, horrific place because it's easier to see it that way than it is to go deep inside ourselves and experience the feelings that we have stuffed, repressed, suppressed, or whatnot. Hoping that makes sense. So when we get back to this idea of suffering then, our suffering is what we've done in our tendency to resist the unpleasant components of life. It's the stuffing and the repression and the hiding all these shadow selves, you can call them, in the collective unconscious. within ourselves. It's like we have this large Pandora's box of all these unwanted experiences and emotions that we just thought were wrong or not good or bad or painful, that we've stuffed inside us because of the pain maybe that we experience from the outside world, right? And our inability or refusal to open up the lid of that box to allow those emotions to be released. Because all emotions and all feelings are just meant, like everything else in life, to come and go, to pass through us. You know, we're just filters in a sense for the experiences life offers us. And when we hang on or cling or avert or resist certain things, those things get stuck inside us. And that's where the suffering comes from. Our refusal to accept life for what it is. Our refusal to accept these emotions inside us so they can just pass through and be gone. You know, so we can get on to the next thing. Our clinging and our grasping and our desiring for things to be a certain way. That's what causes our suffering. So recognizing what suffering is allows us to go deeper, which is to the roots of our suffering. And the roots of our suffering are our clinging and our aversion to what life offers us. It's not what life offers us, because life is just doing what life does, coming and going, flowing this way, flowing that way, giving here, taking there, you know, knocking us down here, lifting us up and carrying us forward there. Life is just being life. But when we cling and hold on to these ideas of how life should be and resist huge components of it, huge aspects of it, stuffing and repressing the things that we don't want in order to avoid feeling them on the conscious level, then that's suffering. By recognizing that's what suffering is, we get to the root cause of suffering. We go deeper. We stop watering the seeds that are causing the unpleasant experience and the resistance, and we start using mindfulness and other techniques, watering the seeds of compassion, love, appreciation, grace. Then our whole experience of life is totally different. But suffering on this level, on the exterior superficial level, if we recognize it, become aware of it, and are willing to go deeper to the root cause of it, to the reason for it, which would be the second noble truth in Buddhism, right? We will discover there's a way out of suffering. Of course, the only way out is in, and in is, in a sense, going deeper, according to Thich Nhat Hanh. So when we go in, and we go deep, and we recognize that there's a cause beyond the superficial idea of suffering that we're experiencing, we can get to the root of the cause and therefore begin to water different seeds other than the ones that cause this experience of suffering. The Buddha said that all the conditions we need for happiness are already within us. We already have the seeds in that deep level, that soil, the deeper level of the soil that we need to process through. It's just a matter of getting there. So the suffering we experience because of the exterior world, which is again a mental formation, a mind reacting to what life has to give us, can lead us deeper. It can take us to the root cause of suffering, and therefore, and it's only there at the root cause of suffering can we find the solutions for suffering. Suffering begins in the mind, suffering ends in the mind. But going inward is that going deeper that the question asked about. Going deeper into that other dimension of space that from which we all came, that stillness, that quiet, that mindfulness, that awareness, that present moment, beyond the thinking and the mental doing and the activities that keep us away from suffering, that keep us away from the root cause of suffering, so that we can experience a different way of being. Deep is always the best way to go. And once, as long as we're staying on the exterior surface, we're going to suffer. Once we go deeper, we'll begin to heal and release those emotions that have led to suffering in the first place. Well, that's my answer. I hope that helps, and thank you again for joining. Namaste.